US President Donald Trump says hostilities with Iran are now over, at least according to a letter that he has sent to the American Congress. Well, the letter suggests that the 60-day deadline to seek approval from the legislative branch no longer applied. Under the War Powers Act of 1973, the president can deploy troops to respond to an imminent threat, but must receive congressional approval within 60 days to continue military operations. Well, Friday marked the end of that window. The letter dated May 1st claims that he launched military operations under Operation Epic Fury on February 28th to protect American people and their interests. Trump then points to a ceasefire that he ordered on April 7th, saying there's been no exchange of fire since then and that the conflict has effectively ended. The letter was addressed to House Speaker Mike Johnson and Senate President pro tempore Chuck Grassley. Later, Trump made it clear that he has no intention of seeking congressional approval, calling the War Powers Act totally unconstitutional. Listen to this.
Well, no other country has ever done it. It's never been, as you know, most people consider it totally unconstitutional. Also, we had a ceasefire, so that gives you additional time. But no other country's done it.
The administration's stance was earlier echoed by U.S. Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, who told lawmakers that the 60-day clock effectively pauses during a ceasefire.
On Iran, ultimately, I would defer to the White House and White House counsel on that. However, we are in a ceasefire right now, which our understanding means the 60-day clock pauses or stops in a ceasefire. We're not in. Yeah. It's our understanding, just so you know.
Okay, well, I do not believe the statute would support that.
Now, Democrats strongly disagree, arguing that the president is bypassing Congress and undermining the balance of power. Meanwhile, a senior Iranian military officer said on Saturday that renewed fighting between the U.S. and Iran was likely. According to Iran's Fars news agency, Mohammad Jafar Asadi, a senior figure in the Iranian military's Central Command, said that evidence has shown that the United States is not committed to any promises or agreements. Iran's Judiciary Chief Ghulam Hossein Mohseni Ejei said on Friday that his country has never shied away from negotiations, but added that it would not accept an imposition of peace terms. The White House has declined to provide details on the latest Iranian proposal, but Axios reported that U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff had submitted amendments putting Tehran's nuclear program back on the negotiating table. The changes reportedly include demands that Iran not move its enriched uranium from bomb sites or resume activity there during the talks. And now to discuss more, we are being joined by Ben Aris, who is a founder and editor-in-chief of IntelliNews, live from Berlin. Thank you so much, Ben, for joining us on the broadcast now. There's a lot to unpack here, but I want to start with what's your assessment of the situation right now? Do you think that the Iran war is now coming to a close, or are we just seeing a reset on the clock, according to you?
To me, it looks like a reset. I mean, both sides have dug into their positions, and neither one is prepared to back down. The ceasefire was called, and there was an opportunity there to try and do a deal that failed. Iran is not moving its positions. It's demanding reparations. It's demanding a security guarantee that it will never be attacked again by either the US or Israel. And it's also insisting that it wants to continue its nuclear or uranium enrichment program, albeit in a reduced form for civil use only. And on the American side, they're demanding the Strait of Hormuz to be opened first and foremost. And there's very little leverage by the states over Iran. It went in with its full force at the end of February and was expecting to defeat militarily Iran immediately, and that didn't happen, to everyone's surprise. And moreover, the IRGC closed down the Strait of Hormuz on March the 2nd, and that was also a surprise. And America's inability to reopen it is also a surprise. And so, you know, the Trump has walked into a cul-de-sac. You can't get out of this now. And so the ceasefire was an opportunity to try and do a deal, which hasn't gone anywhere. And now I think he's toying with the idea of going back to a military solution. They've been threatening, they've been resupplying, they've been restocking, regrouping during this ceasefire and building up forces. But then we'll go back to the same situation at the end of the start of this war, the beginning of March. where the military might have shown it's ineffective in this asymmetrical war. And I don't know where we go from there. How do we get out of this? I think Iran is prepared to just keep fighting for 20 years if it needs to. And the States certainly is not in that position.
Right, and this also exposes the certain loophole here where the administration argues that the ceasefire effectively pauses the clock. But is there any legal basis for that, according to you, or is that just a creative interpretation to buy more time here? Because if the administration can actually claim that the ceasefire actually amounts to a pause, then the administration can indefinitely prolong the military conflict.
Exactly. They're just making things up, aren't they? Trying to find an excuse. Because, the bottom line is this is a war. Trump has actually, ironically, been forced into the same position as Putin and calling it a special military operation, which is not a war. And so, obviously, the president needs congressional approval to actually start a proper war. And so we're in this special military operation phase where he has 60 days. And there's nothing in the statutes that talks about being able to suspend it because some peace talks are going on. They're just making that bit up because he wants an excuse. I mean, as your report suggested, I mean, he's trying to find a workaround in order to ignore Congress. And we now wait to see whether Congress is actually going to stand up and insist on the law. And Trump overrides the law, ignores it again and again. So I don't think the military operations will stop. I don't think he'll pull his punches. He'll do what he wants to do, even if it's technically illegal. But technically, at this point, Congress should get involved and they should formally approve what will become officially a war if they do.
Of course, and even though that they've deliberately created this grey zone where we're not quite at war, but also not quite at peace, we understand that the oil markets have been reacting. There's dwindling support domestically, and with the November midterms, do you think that the administration would have the appetite for a prolonged conflict or, boots on the ground going ahead from this point onwards?
Absolutely not. I mean, the irony here is this Trump's come in and sold himself as a peacemaker worthy of a Nobel Peace Prize. And what has he done? He's started the biggest conflict in the Middle East since, I don't know, since the fall of the Shah. And the practical problem is that at the moment, markets are pricing oil on the assumption that this will be resolved relatively soon. And the straits will open again and oil flows will resume and markets will calm down. And if that doesn't happen, then the price at the pump is creeping up. And politically, for an American politician, that's a death sentence in elections. They're already up at around $4 a gallon in the States. They may go to $5 a gallon. And that will punish the Republicans in the elections, in the midterms in November. And I think they're already going to be punished by the fact that Trump has promised peace and actually brought war. And so they're looking to be decimated. They'll lose control of both houses, and that will defang Trump because you'll have a Democratic dominated a government. And then he won't be able to just ride roughshod over all these laws as he's been doing now because he'll be brought to account by the Democrats, in theory.
Right. Oh, we hear you, Beth, but now, as Donald Trump has said that hostilities in Iran have now ended. Iran has said that there is still a scope for renewed conflict to, re-emerge, and they are ready for it. But at the same time, Trump has been, in a way, downplaying the impact because now he said that while they would be on their way back from Iran, they might, dock their ships closer to Cuba now. What do you think is actually at play here? Is it a strategic shifting of the focus away from the Iran war, while there were also reports of a short and powerful wave of strikes to, bring them back to the negotiating table? What do you think is the strategy here?
I think Iran has actually shown itself to be willing to talk, and that there has, for example, on the nuclear uranium enrichment program, it's already offered to send its stockpile, 400 kilos of highly enriched uranium. It's offered to send some of that to places like China or Russia, and to dilute the rest. And that was a key demand. Although the problem with Iran is it's dug its heels in quite harsh demands, security guarantee, remain control of Hormuz. But the Americans keep shifting position, and Trump is half of what he says is for the domestic audience because of the midterms, and half of it is negotiating positions. But he flip-flops continuously And this has gone right back to the talks in Geneva that were going on over the uranium enrichment program on the day before the war, where a deal was done. And then the Iranians felt betrayed because they woke up the next morning to discover their country was being bombed after they'd done a deal they thought the Americans were going to accept and actually restart relations. And they're digging their heels in so that they're not prepared to back down until they get solid guarantees. And so the Iranians are just sticking to their line and listening to all of this stuff that Trump's pushing out. Like one day he says he's going to destroy the whole country and kill everybody. The next day he says the war is over. And none of it makes any sense. But like I say, half of what Trump says plays the domestic audience with the elections in sight. And the other half is like, what is he going to do? And he still believes that the American army is not only the most powerful in the world, but that it's invincible. And so he still believes, I think, that there's a military option. But increasingly, you know, watching this war, I don't think there is a military option. It just will grind on forever. So he needs to create some sort of victory in order to get out of this. But the Iranians are not helping because if he accepts any of their terms, it's going to be a massive humiliation for the states, particularly and especially if this ends with Tehran controlling the access and passage through the Straits of Hormuz. Before it was open and free to anyone. Going forward, it's going to end up under the control of Tehran and they're going to charge a toll. And if that is the solution, which to me looks like the only solution now, that will be a massive humiliation for Trump. And so he's going to have to engineer some excuse to get out of this with that solution without making himself look stupid. And I don't see he can exit without looking stupid.
We hear you, Ben. Those were some very interesting points that you raised there, but of course we'll have to wait and see where it goes from here. But for now, thank you so much for joining us on the broadcast and sharing your insights with us.
My pleasure, always.